Birds, people, and the dogs that bring them together. This is episode number 20. My name is Bill, and you're tied to the Woe Post. I appreciate each one of you taking the time out of your day to listen to the Woe Post podcast. I hope you find it valuable. I'd especially like to thank my Patreon patrons for voluntarily contributing your hard-earned money and for keeping the podcast going. Running a podcast takes a lot of time, and it's not cheap, so every little bit helps. If you'd like to help keep the podcast going, head on over to patreon.com/thewopost and become a patron. And with my new puppy coming and Skeet's pending litter, I'll have a ton of exclusive content starting over there in a little over a month. If you'd like to contact me, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at The Woe Post, by email bill@thewopost.com, or through my website www.thewopost.com. The French Spaniel is a very old breed, perhaps dating back to the 14th century. Originally used for net hunting and falconry, it was rarely found outside of France until 1970 when it was first imported into Canada. Capable over land or water, the French Spaniel's true strengths show in the fields and forests. A close working dog with a comfortable pace, they're known to adapt their trot to all sorts of terrain. At 21 to 24 inches tall at the withers, they're one of the largest spaniel breeds. Their hair is medium long with wavy furnishings on the ears, legs, and tail. They're a calm, loving dog, better suited for the home than the kennel, and should be trained using modern, positive techniques. Like last week's Blue Picardy Spaniel, there's currently only one kennel for this breed in the United States. It's Minnesota French Spaniels, owned by Paul Fishenich. Paul, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to have you on the show. It's not easy to find an ambassador of the French Spaniel breed.
No, there's not very many of us.
No, not in this country anyway, right?
All right.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Paul Fishenich. I've been breeding French Spaniels for 26 years, and that was always kind of a side gig, more of a hobby than a business, because I was a full-time teacher and a coach. I was an elementary PE teacher and coached numerous sports, and so with all that and doing the dogs, we've always been pretty busy. But it's been a good sideline. We've been able to help the kids in college with the extra dog money and stuff, and that was one of the major goals of starting a business. Was my wife and I are both teachers, and I'm not one of these teachers that complains about our salary. I said we made a decent wage, but never with a lot of extra money. So if we were going to help the kids with college, we wanted to start a dog business and we didn't want to have the same kind of dog that everybody else had. We wanted to have something that was more rare, and so that was the goal, and it definitely helped. We weren't able to pay for all their college, but we paid for a lot of it, and other things for them, with the dog money. So it was, besides just liking breeding dogs and stuff, but that was the goal of starting an actual business with this.
Now, did you grow up with dogs?
When I was little, we had a solid German short hair, no spots or anything, it was just all brown. And my dad, he was a painter, and we also ran a restaurant. So my dad would paint all day, and then he would go to the restaurant at night and work. After he got done painting, my mom would come home then. And so he never had time to train the dog. We just had the dog, but everybody knew I was going to be, they said I was destined to be a dog guy because, when I was little, they couldn't find me anywhere. And they'd be looking for me, and they'd be yelling, "Hey, Paul, where's Paul at?" And they're yelling for me. And finally, they say, "Did anybody look in the doghouse?" And they'd get down on their knees and look in there, and I'd crawled in with the dogs, and I was sleeping on the side of the dogs, and that was where they always start looking. And pretty soon that was the first place to start looking when they couldn't find me. But that dog was never a hunter. My dad never trained it to hunt or anything. And so then we grew up, but my dad was more of a bull hunter and for deer, but I always liked hunting with a gun, but he was always working and stuff. And I don't know if you see kids doing this nowadays, but the hunting areas were 3 or 4 miles, 5 miles, the closest ones to me outside of town. So I just grab my gun, get my shells, and I'd be walking through town with a gun in my hand, I wonder what would happen nowadays if you were doing that. Now I would when I was 13 or 14, I would just hike to the fields where I could hunt, and I would hunt all day and or at least until I got my game, and then I would hike back in, and then but still with no dog. And some of the reasons where I really wanted a dog, because my dad had said, "Now you don't ever leave something behind. You work and work until you find your, what you knock down and stuff." And I was out, in some of these ponds, and it was like late October, and there's actually a little bit of ice on the water and stuff. And some of these ponds were big, and we shot some ducks. And my buddy goes, "Oh, we're not going to get those." All of a sudden, he looks over and says, "What are you doing?" And I'm stripping down, and now I'm down to just my underwear. And he says, "You're going in that ice water to get that duck?" And I said, "My dad says you never leave anything behind." And so then I would go out there and swim all the way out to get that duck, and then come back. And then we said, "We need a dog."
Yeah, your dad said never leave a dog behind or never leave a duck behind. And your mom probably said, "What the hell are you doing in that frozen water?"
Yeah, yeah. So I did that as an adult too with a man, and he just thought it was crazy. We'd knocked down a goose, and so my first dog I ever got, I think that a lot of people end up this way, is I just had a lab given to me, and it was back when things were cheaper, and uh, the guy wanted $50 for a puppy, and I said, "I really don't need a dog right now. I already have one." And I had a black lab, and then I got that one, but that was really good, the good hunter. She turned out to be a really good hunter. Uh, Her name was Harriet, and the other dog was Ozzy. So Ozzy and Harriet, it's an old TV show. That's
Oh,
where,
wow, yeah.
so that's where we named them.
I saw
And
reruns of that one, but haven't
right,
never saw it as it was
I
coming
got
out.
probably 30 years on you, so that might be one for me. But then one day I went out and I hung with a guy that had German short hairs, and he had one of just as far as I was concerned, a worthless dog. It was so far in the distance you couldn't see it, and it wasn't finding any birds. But he
Hmm.
had he had a male that was staying fairly close, and that male was finding all kinds of birds that this other dog just ran right past. And he was locked up on point, and it was just so fun to watch. I'd never done that before, and I'd walked up on him, and the guy was teaching me, come around the front and flush the bird, and so I was actually learning on the job, how to hunt with a pointer, and I just came home that day and I told my wife, I said, "God, we gotta get a pointing dog. That was just so much fun. I'd never done it before, and at the time also out there in South Dakota, there were no e-collars or anything like that to control the dogs. And at that time in South Dakota, there was just a huge boom in jackrabbits. People were doing fundraisers shooting jackrabbits. Like one weekend, they went out and they shot 1,200 jackrabbits, for a little boy with cancer, and they were getting $50 or 50 cents a pelt. And so all those pelts money went to the boy with cancer, and there were no e-collars, so I actually tied a rope around my waist and then a rope onto the lab, because I couldn't get them back otherwise, because they were just they'd chase a rabbit, and then before they get back, they'd find another rabbit, So anyway, getting a dog that actually stopped and waited for you was a big plus. So this guy that had the German short hairs, he said, "Well, this is pretty cold here. My dogs sometimes don't do real good in the cold weather, but I think a wire hair is a little hard to your dog, and you might want to try that if you're going to get into a pointer." And so I did get into them, and they were, I had two, and I had one litter out of them, and they were both fantastic hunters. But I don't know if if you get more of the German side, the more Drahthaar side of the wire here, they can be a little bit sharp temperament. And the ones I had, I mean, my kids were little then, and they just approach them, and all of a sudden you hear this, and the kids weren't even bothering them yet. And so I said, "Well, I can't have that, and I didn't if I didn't trust a dog around my kids, I just couldn't keep them. But although they were just, with great respect to the wire here people out there, they were really absolute great hunters. But they're known to have that sharp temperament. So then I kind of start looking, and I know people can't see the video, but this book right here, the Simon and Schuster Dog Book, and out of the whole book, there was one dog I just really, really liked what it looked like, and what the description. It talked about a dog that was close working, pointed, was good in the water or upland, and it was just beautiful. It was just a beautiful, setter-like dog with spaniel features. And then it said the downside, the description is in France and difficult to get. Well, then I said, gosh, I told my wife, I said, I'd love to get that dog, but I don't know how to import a dog from France. And then one day in Gun Dog magazine, I saw an ad for a French Spaniel. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, within 5 minutes, I was on the phone, and I called him, and the first person was a woman I got a hold of, and she just kept giggling, and all I could say, no speak English, no speak English, kind of, but her husband, who was raised to dogs, he did speak English, and his name was Dr. Coulter, and that's where I got my first female from. I picked a litter of that one, and he lined me up with a guy named Pierre Venier, who got me a male. He was a very prominent breeder at the time. He's not doing it anymore, but at the time, yeah, he was one of the top breeders in the world of French Spaniels. And I love talking to Pierre because he had this deep voice with a very strong French accent. It was just kind of fun talking to him. I found myself talking kind of in that French accent whenever I'd have a conversation with him. But so that was what we started out with. Our first dogs were Belle and Chase. Chase means hunter in French, and Belle means beautiful in French. And so we thought those were good names. And we started from there. And then, we started out with 2 dogs, and now we have 15, French Spaniels. And so I think we probably have the most in not just United States or Canada, but I think we have the most in the world of any breeder. And that's not necessarily by choice, though.
Oh, no? How did that happen then?
Well, it's because, in other countries where there's multiple breeders, those people don't need as many dogs because, they kind of work it out and say, well, why don't you, if you're going to get a dog from that line, I'll get a dog from this line. And then we can work together. I'll trade a stud dog to you that I have that'll work with your line over here, and you trade me that dog. And so they don't need to have all these dogs, but because I'm the only one in the United States and I don't want to breed my lines too close together, then I have to have multiple dogs out there. Like I have 5 different males, and then all the rest are females, and a couple of them are retired, so we're not breeding them all. But so you need that. We call our breeding philosophy the double triangle. We have to have at least 3 females and at least 3 males that have absolutely no relation. So there has to be 6 dogs that aren't related. And if you get that 6, then you can sustain yourself without having to import new dogs. But you got to study it, and you got to breed the right dog at the right time, and you got to keep a dog at the right time. That's compatible with the other ones. And so we work real hard to maintain that double triangle where we're not, mixing the gene pool too close together. And, just the other day, we kind of found out how difficult that can be to keep that gene pool. Like sometimes, and I've called different countries, and it's true how they answer me. They say, and I said, can you send me a dog over here? And I'd like, something with a different line. And they say, why should I do that? And I said, well, because I need one. But because I need to, keep my gene pool. But they'll say, well, I sell all my dogs here, and it's a whole lot of work to, export a dog. It really is a lot of work. Why should I go all that extra work when I'll sell all my puppies anyway? And I don't need to do that, And so some breeders won't work with you. And so what happens, there's always a couple breeders in different countries that are willing to help breeders in another country. And so just last week, the British club, from the United Kingdom, they wanted to see if I could help them thin out their gene pool. And I said, well, I got a lot of dogs. That shouldn't be any problem at all. But those same breeders from other countries that sent me dogs sent them dogs. to start out when they were getting going.
Oh,
Then I sent them to some breeders in Canada. Well, those same breeders that sent the British people dogs and sent me dogs also sent dogs to people in Canada. So, well, here we thought we had this worldwide gene pool that we could start choosing from. It was a lot closer in line than what we thought, you know. So I wasn't able to help the British people because I mean half of my line I could have, but in order to get a pup, I have to breed it with a line that's close to theirs, and it just wasn't working. So that's maybe one of the bigger challenges with a rare breed of dog is keeping a thinner gene pool, you know, and not trying to get things too close together.
you know, all of the continental breeds really struggled during World War II, and they've been recovering ever since. But the bigger, more ubiquitous breeds, I think it's a little bit easier for them. And I think those of us that have less common dogs in our breed, we're on the struggle bus a little bit.
And, you said you had small Munsterlanders, right?
Yes, I do.
Is the same problem with them, you know, or I think it's a little larger gene pool there, isn't there?
It is. It's a little bit easier. It's getting to be a more popular breed now. It's actually a very popular breed in Germany. I think I read just the other day it's a third most popular pointing dog in Germany and in Denmark. So doing very well over there. And I don't know how accurate that is. I just read it. So it doesn't mean it's
Right.
true. So don't hate me if I'm wrong. But there are actually enough breeders here in the US now with a diverse enough gene pool that we could sustain pretty easily. Doesn't mean that we won't import more dogs. I'm actually most likely going to breed my female to an import here pretty soon. He's been here for a while. He's been used 3 or 4 times already, but phenomenal dog. But we're big enough that we don't have too many problems anymore.
Yeah, you know, and sometimes you look at the small Munsterlander, and I think people that own French Spaniels, and sometimes they're, I don't know the difference. Maybe they're a little, from what I've seen, the small Munsterlanders I've seen, they look, some of them look an awful lot like a French Spaniel, but I think they're a little thicker than our French Spaniels, the ones I've seen. You know, I mean, a little huskier, maybe a little more muscular.
Maybe it's hard to say. My female is definitely a girly dog. She's not frail, but when you look at her, there's no question that that's a girl. We know that there's some Spaniel influence in the small Munsterlander, and there are folks that say, well, it's a German Spaniel, or whatever they were called back, some sort of Wachelhund or something. I don't know, something back then. But it's hard to say it wasn't a French Spaniel when you look at a French Spaniel, because from 100 yards, you probably couldn't tell the dogs apart.
Right. I've seen some. The first time I saw them, I go, "Wow, that looks." You know, these. I actually looked at them. I think we talked earlier that I had gone to a kennel once, but then once I got my French Spaniels, and then I saw somebody out there at a NAVDA training session, and I said, "Oh, somebody else has a French Spaniel." And then as I got closer, they said, "No, that's a small Munsterlander." So they definitely, even for my eyes, they were very similar, you know.
Sure.
And, back in one of the things I always thought was very interesting about these dogs, and maybe it wasn't just a French Spaniel, but way back in the, long before there were guns and stuff, and the hunters hunted with nets, and so when you see the English pointers and some of the setters with the high tails, that would never have passed for a net hunting dog, and so some of these dogs that really even have some real ancient lines in them, you'll still see them every once in a while. They'll point really low on a low crouch, and that was, they were taught that they would just throw the net over the dog then and catch the birds because there were no guns or anything, And so I always wondered, I said, God, that'd be kind of fun way to hunt but I'm sure that DNR would frown on that, But if
Yeah,
you're
I'm
doing
not sure
close,
that's legal anymore.
no, no. But we have sold some people dogs. One guy I never got to see him hunt, but he said he was such a good shot with a gun that there was no challenge for him to shoot a pheasant or anything. So he hunted pheasants with bow and arrow, and so he got one of our dogs for that. And we had another one that hunted with a falcon, you know, with our dogs, you know. So some of those alternative hunting things I think would be kind of fun, you know. But uh, yeah,
That's,
but
that sounds really cool. I don't know if obviously you have to have some archery skill to shoot a bird on the wing with a bow. It sounds a little bit braggadocious for somebody to say, "Well, I'm so good with a shotgun that I had to challenge myself some more." I might throw the flag on that one.
yeah, yeah. So I always I never got to see him hunt with it. I really wanted to do the prove it kind of thing,
Sure.
show me. But
Show me how good you are with a shotgun first, right?
right, yeah. But it's a
Uh,
little easier off a point, that was the one thing I always liked versus we used to call it the Labrador trot, when because sometimes pheasants and stuff will run straight away from you, and all of a sudden, if the bird was really starting to move fast, the lab would start moving faster, and if you want to get a shot off, you got to kind of start trotting to get close enough to shoot when that bird was going to get flushed, and again, hunting with a dog that would just stop and wait for you. That was quite incredible. But the biggest difference, I've seen of other, like when I had the German wire hairs, German my German wire hairs were really hard chargers. I mean, it was kind of fun, but it was also uh, a Brittany owner told me once that he had one of his Brittany's that caused him great stress. He said I always felt my Brittany was kind of on the edge, out of control, and she was a really good hunter, but I just didn't know if I was going to be able to keep her under control. And my German wire hairs are kind of like that, and they would just be streaking through the fields and just slam into a point. But the French Spaniels, more of an easygoing, kind of I always said they're trotters and gliders. They just kind of ease their way through the field at a very, very, comfortable pace for you as a hunter. You're not worried about them that they're going too fast or it's just stressful to you. It's just a very, very relaxing pace. And then instead of slamming into that point like a lot of breeds do, they just kind of slowly ease into a point. And and with a lot of pointing dogs, you can tell how close the bird is by the intensity of their point. You know the if the bird's far away, they might not even get down, and they might have their head up high and just stop and freeze. And if they're just catching the wind, or if it's still a reasonable distance away, uh, they'll have a little bit lower tail, and they'll be locked up, but their tail will be lower. But if it's right close to them, then that tail is straight back, and they're just intense. I don't know if your Munsterlander is kind of the same way, or
the Munsterlanders don't have as staunch of a point as an English pointer or a really good setter or a short hair or a wire hair. And that's a challenge for us a little bit in test, and especially with NAVDA testing, and maybe for you guys as well, where a lot of judges want to see that just rock solid staunch point. That's not something that you're going to get out of most Munsterlanders, and I would assume French Spaniels kind of the same. So some judges, they might it's probably not gonna hurt you, but it's not going to impress them as much, and then you may feel it in another part of the test because they just may not have as much patience for you anymore, or for the dog anymore. They already have an opinion that, well, a dog's at a soft point. Now they're already, they're looking for other things.
yeah, I had that one dog that I tested, and uh, she did a really good job finding. She found of the 18 dogs tested that day. She found by far the most birds in the field, but they didn't. He kept telling me the judge, those that don't go through NAVDA tests, there's usually three judges walking behind, and there's one judge walking with the handler, and he's talking to the handler and telling him where to go, and everybody's kind of getting a score and of how they see things. And he kept telling me, he says, you need to get that dog out of gun range, or you're not going to score well. Well, that's one of the things we kind of aim for is, not necessarily right in gun range, but not very far from gun range. So if you're hunting like the national grasslands of South Dakota or the sandhills of Nebraska, a French Spaniel might not really be for you. You might want a dog that that's much more far ranging because the cover is so big. But for the average person, like here in Minnesota, we have lots of small fields, and maybe a couple hundred acres, and or less, and you don't need a dog that's going to run big. It's just large enough for you to hunt for a few hours on one piece with a close working dog. But even like when you're talking about soft points, you know she was trotting back and forth, and she was stopping and freeze, and she was a young dog again. So when they're young, until they really really realize what they're hunting, they have a pretty low point, kind of like maybe with their tail. And the judge was asking, and I said, he goes, "Is that a point?" And I go, "Well, sure, it's a point." And I go, "Well," he says, "Well, go kick it, see if there's a bird there." And I said, "Well," I said, "There is a bird there." She wouldn't stop like that if there wasn't. And so again, he wasn't familiar with the breed, and I don't think he was, even though she found the most birds, I don't think he was overly impressed with, because I think he was more geared towards some of the dogs like setters and some pointers and things like that had more intense points, and I think that was what he was looking for. So sometimes in the testing programs, you just have to build them into it, But as far as for NAVDA, the dogs that there's been dogs that have done really really well. There's a few from Canada that have gone to be versatile champions, and the dogs, some of my I always encourage people to give it a try. I think it's really a good organization for people just if they're just getting started with the dog, because there's just such a community of NAVDA where everybody works together, and because every dog can score well. Now it's based on a standard, not against competition against other dogs. And so because everybody's based against a standard, your dog can do really well, the other guy's dog can do well, and nobody loses. So everybody wants, so they help each other out so much, and that's what I always kind of really liked about the NAVDA. But a lot of our people that have done, they haven't got perfect scores, but they got pretty good scores. Our dogs, and like 110 kind of area. I haven't had anybody get that tested our dogs get a 112 yet in the natural ability, but the 110s are pretty good.
There's nothing wrong. I honestly believe that any prize in natural ability is a good dog, especially you're talking about a puppy. So who knows? I mean, dogs are really good at making liars out of us, and who knows how that dog is going to operate that day. And I'm a nervous wreck on test days. It doesn't matter how well I've prepared or how much I think the dog is prepared, because I know what could happen, right?
Yeah, for me, and I really get a kick out watching all the people that have the higher level dogs, the higher level tests, and I just wanted to kind of get my dog on the right track, and so I would kind of just go with the puppy, the natural ability test and stuff, and then that would help on testing day with other stuff, But for me, it was a camaraderie of, sometimes I would go to the training sessions at NAVDA, and I wouldn't even bring a dog. I would just go there and help other people with their dogs, and plant birds for them, and shoot, be the gunner and things like that. If they needed help, it was just fun to get out there and be with other like-minded people that enjoyed dogs and hunting. So that was for me maybe even more important. Now the testing is important because you're trying to find out what dogs you might want to continue in breeding programs and stuff. But this is a camaraderie of people too was real important to me when we were in the NAVDA. And I was the newsletter guy. So what I like to go out there with my camera and take pictures of each people, and everybody had a story on how they got into their dogs and at what level they're at. And I always kind of like to put every month put a story about a different individual in the newsletter, and people seem to enjoy that. Like some goes, "Well, when's my turn? when you get the story on me?" Yeah.
Well, that's fun though. I mean, it sounds like you found a really good chapter, and that's, like you said, the biggest part is the community. If you have a good chapter, then people want to be there. So that makes it a lot of fun. I usually end up gunning at our training days. not because I'm so good of a shotgunner that I need to bring my bow and challenge myself a little bit more. But I think, people are confident that I'll usually do my best to make sure their dog has a good opportunity for a retrieve.
Yeah, yeah.
So as challenging, I'm sure it's challenging to build and maintain a good breeding stock. What is it about the French Spaniels that's kept you resilient and, involved with the breed?
Yeah, they're, like part of it's his personality. You know, I was reading that one article, that I was part of, that they were they were interviewing French Spaniel breeders from all over the world. And like the one guy said, they're, a real common term for describing them are sweet. They just have this sweet, gentle personality, and they're not overbearing dog. And they really, I think they really make a human connection. Uh, and they like when they're just your shadow when you're in the house. We have a really nice kennel. It's heated, air conditioned, everything's art. The dogs that are in the kennel are living in luxury as far as kennels go. We always have 3 or 4 in the house, and wherever you go, they are. And they just got this beautiful person. Actually, some of them will actually they want to make contact with you. They want to be like when you're in the field hunting. It's like they want to be your partner. And sometimes we all do that when we're training the young dogs, where we'll just lay down in the field and get them nervous, and they'll start coming back and checking with you. And that's one of the ways you teach a young dog to check back, because they get nervous and all of a sudden they realize that you're not there. But you'll see them quite often. They'll stand up on their hind legs, trying to look back and see where you're at. Every once in a while you get one that's a little bit a bigger ranger, but they really don't. Especially in heavy cover, they don't get much out of gun range, and generally they're well within gun range when they're hunting. And it's kind of a combination. They're a beautiful dog, and they just got a beautiful personality too. And I think it's that combination. And I actually use that term a lot of times, that they're just a great combination dog. They're a great family dog, great hunting dog, and they're just so versatile. We use the term with continental dogs as a versatile breed. And with Nada too. But I just kind of wrote down some of the things that some of our people are doing with these dogs. Of course, there's the knobbed, and they're recognized through AKC now. And so some other people are just, there's a lady down in Texas that's just killing it on the AKC test circuit with her French Spaniel. And then they hunt everything, every bird in the United States they hunt. We've placed dogs in almost every state in the United States. And so they've hunted everything. And they're good in the water, but then there's people that are going through. It's a long process to go become a service dog, and it's because they got that really nice temperament, this sweet temperament, as everybody describes it, that they make a really good service dog. But it's a big long process before you have to go to hundreds of hours of classes in order for your dog to pass these service tests. And there's 2 of the dogs out east that have done that. Then sometimes they do the agility tests, and I can't think of, it's kind of a racing thing where the dog's tied to you, and you're racing with the dog and a person. And there's a lady down in Alabama. She does like the mutter test, where you're going through the runs and the dog's going through with you. And then the real
That sounds like
lady,
fun.
the real interesting lady is she trains her French Spaniels to be cadaver dogs. And so she goes all over whenever there's a natural disaster and they're looking for people. But that's a very important service too. She said
Sure.
that because people are just waiting to find out news, good or bad, about their loved ones. And so she took it upon herself to train her dogs to do that. And now she's also added a Boykin Spaniel to her list of people. You talked to her the one day. That was Elaine McKinney.
Yep, she's the one who hooked me up with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what she does with her dogs. And so she's kind of a fun lady to talk to. But I mean, they're just such good hunters. I mean, some of the things that when I think about things I'm just amazed at sometimes is and I get really excited about is when young dogs just go out right away and with very little training just perform like, how do you know that? And when I first got started, uh, this Pierre Veneer, and I was going to do his French accent, but I won't try it. But he, and I was asking him all kinds of questions, and he said, "Don't worry about it, Paul." He says, "Don't worry about it. It's all in the breeding." And he said, "Some learn it fast, some learn it slow. Once learned, never forgotten." He says, "Once a French Spaniel learns it, you don't have to go over it again. They know it. They know it for life." And that's what he said. He said it's all in the breeding. And I kind of think that's true. You know, we try to breed so that we call it breeding to the middle. And on purpose, it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while there's a more aggressive dog. If we're looking to keep one out of the litter or somebody else's, I avoid that dog like the plague. Other breeds, people are drawn to that dog, but we avoid them. We want to produce a dog that's really easy to handle. So we look for either mild to middle temperaments within the breed. And now over the years that we're using a lot of our own dogs back, people always ask me, they say, well, can you tell me a little bit more about this pup's, the yellow collar pup's personality or the blue collar pup's personality? And I said, I really like to tell you that I know everything about them, but I go out and watch them, they're just more the same than they are different, and I think that's just because we don't reach out and get those high personality dogs. We try to avoid them, and because we want to have this really easy to hunt with dog. I always remember this man from St. Paul. He calls me up and he said he wanted to get a dog. He said I've never hunted, but I think it's part of a Minnesota heritage, and I want my boys to hunt. And so I'm sending my boys to the gun safety, and he goes, and I'm going to it because nobody ever taught me how to hunt, or how to shoot a gun. So I'm going to go to the gun safety with my boys and learn. But then once we learn about gun safety, I want to get a dog, and so I kind of picked out a French Spaniel. So and so all along the way, he didn't know anything about training a dog. He'd never had a dog before, and once they got their gun safety, they got a dog from us, and a couple years later, they got another dog from us, and so now they're hunting in northern Minnesota, up by the Canadian border, and they have the annual teacher convention where the kids get a couple of days off of school and tied into a weekend. So they went up there, and that was the first time they were really gone out. And he sends me all these pictures, and I said, well, holy cow! I mean, they were hunting rough grouse. I said, how many grouse did you guys get? Well, I don't know if we did any good or not, but we got 24. And and I said, that's a lot of grouse. I mean, they didn't get them all in one day.
No, of course not. But
but he says, is that any good? I said, there's some people that they don't get that many in the season.
Sure.
You got them on a weekend. And he said, well, yeah, the dogs pointed all the birds, and everyone we shot, they went out and brought back. And these were guys that knew nothing about training a dog. He called me a lot and asked for tips and things. But there was a case, where they're pretty natural hunters. And if you get them exposed to birds and just get them out in the field, even if you don't really know anything about dogs, they're going to hunt for you. And probably my best example of that was, up to right now in this timeline, back like 5 years, my wife and I just ran into a lot of bad luck, health-wise. So even while we ran into some bad, like we got in a really bad car accident, like I actually had to bring my wife back to life. She wasn't breathing after, when we got T-boned on an interstate. And so I've pounded on her chest I had a broken shoulder and arm hanging in the window on that arm. And with my free arm, I'm pounding on her chest, trying to bring her back to life,
Wow.
And she had, and after that, and then there was 8 hours of surgery just to keep her alive. And then throughout that process, she had 8 major surgeries. It took that long. So that was over several years. And then right after that, she decided she wanted to get 2 new knees. So she got 2 new knees. And then I had an appendectomy. And then I had cancer. And so I had 2 cancer surgeries that laid me up for a while. And so all that time, it was time for us to be adding some new dogs to our kennel. So we had added 3 new dogs over that 5 year span, and with really zero time because of all our health problems that we had to actually train them. But I did finally, get the okay from the doctor. Or there was a couple times I got to go out hunting and I wasn't taking care of my wife, and then when I was the doctor, I begged him. He kept saying, he says, no hunting. He said, when you shoot a gun, those stitches that they can pull out inside. And he said, once that happens, the internal hemorrhages and stuff. He said you're not going to be happy, and I'm not going to be happy because I'm going to have to go back in and fix it. So finally, after much begging, he allowed me to. He said, all right, as long as you're not walking anything real tough. And I said, well, I'll just walk some grouse trails. But so these dogs that went out there that had never hunted, I'd never trained them. I'd never even showed them a bird. And I took them out on day one. They were pointing and retrieving birds. Like this dog I got laying right by my feet here, that her name's Maddie, and it was her first hunt. And I had 2 dogs, and I didn't have my GPS stuff then. And I had 2 dogs off to the right of the trail hunting, and she was off to the other side. And a grouse got up, and I shot it. And a lot of times my dogs just flock right to where they think the bird went, but it was in the woods, so they didn't quite know. So I was trying to find where Maddie was in the woods so I could get her to, some experience with a bird because she hadn't been exposed to birds yet. And so I'm calling, I'm looking, I can't find her, and I'm looking, and I didn't, like I said, didn't have the GPS to know right where she was at, just bells dinging in the woods. And all of a sudden, I'm calling out, and I look down, and there she is on sit, holding the grouse in her mouth. So I'm trying to call her to go find it so she can learn what a bird is. And without ever been exposed to a bird, she went out and got it and retrieved it. And all the other dogs were just the same way. Like Gracie was like that, and Pepper. Just from in this. And I told Carl, I said, if nothing doesn't prove that these guys are just totally natural, those 3 dogs, nothing else will, because those 3 dogs was, again, zero training, and went out and, I got them on land where there's birds, but they knew what to do when they found them. And so I guess it's all in the breeding, I guess.
It absolutely is, and that's a symptom, a result of good breeding and breeding back to the middle, because when you breed to the middle, the product is highly predictable. But when you're breeding for outliers, if you start breeding for bigger running dogs or closer working dogs or better swimming dogs, and you're breeding specifically like that, like some line breeders will do, but then what you end up with is potentially a dog that's atypical. And when you look at almost all conformation standards and temperament standards, the first line is looks like a dog, right? Looks like a French Spaniel, looks like a Small Munsterlander, right? The reason we have temperament characteristics is because they're consistent. And when we start breeding for inconsistencies there, then the temperament standards go away. There are, you know what I'm saying? The predictable temperament goes away, right? I don't think there are temperament standards necessarily for most breeds, but the predictability goes out the window.
You're right, and like I said, we try to have our little pet sayings, like everybody does, like our double triangle of breeding and breeding to the middle. That's just what we tell people, and then our other little pet saying is that high percentage dog, and I always tell people, I said, it doesn't matter where you pick, there's no actual science to picking a puppy. I mean,
No.
Some people like to turn them around and see how much they fidget when you do that. But I said, it doesn't matter. You get the first puppy or the last puppy. If there are high percentage dogs. There's a really, really good chance you're going to get an outstanding dog, and it doesn't matter whether you're first or last. And we do handle, like when they're puppies, we handle them every single day. We go out and we flip them all different directions, and we turn them, we stick our fingers in their mouth, and we wrap them in blankets and stuff, and we try to to really socialize them through the whole process. And that's one of the things that I think people really like about our kennel is, you know, we weren't always given the best service. I mean, I remember one guy I imported a dog from, and I kept asking him, going to send me some pictures, and he just never sent me any pictures. And finally, he sent me two pictures. One was of three pups running, and they're all blurry, and the other was of all the litter of puppies with their heads in a food dish. Those were the only those were the only pictures. And then it was kind of like that way with all the foreign breeders. Just like, did nobody ever tell you about customer service? How you should treat people, and so we probably go to the opposite extreme. We send out. I sent you some of that information. I try to educate people all along the way, and I never send everything all at once, because if you get too much stuff at once, you just don't look at it. It's overwhelming. So I kind of spoon feed along the way, but videos is what people really like. And we probably send 70 or more videos, through the time, not as many early on, because puppies are pretty boring when they're newborns.
Mm-hmm.
But as they get older, we have, like I said, all over the United States. Like this week, we delivered a pup to Maryland, the state of Washington. My daughter's going to South Carolina Saturday, and my son went out to New York with another puppy. So we send dogs all over the United States. So these people can't come and look at the dogs, in person very often. And so it used to be in the old days. I don't know if you're young enough to remember VHS tapes, the big things.
I'm not as young as you think I am, just so you know. Yeah, I remember those very well. Yeah.
And so we actually
I still have some, actually.
Well, we had a machine that would record those, and we could make multiple tapes. So I was sending VHS tapes off in the mail, so I didn't, of course, do that near as often as I do now with the video clips. But now, and then the next step was, you could send, I had to have certain software, and I could send videos, but like the longest video could be was 2.5 minutes. That was the max. And now I send videos that are like 25 minutes long, and I want them to be like they came for a visit. So I don't want you just to see a 2-minute little clip of the dogs. We'll do those, but we'll actually be just showing individual dogs. But when they're all interacting with things, I said, this is going to be like a 25-minute. You came to our kennel, and you're just watching the pups and seeing how they interact with the other dogs, and people love that. They sometimes I think I send too many, and they all say no, send more. But they really like that. And so modern technology, that's really, I think, helped us even be better, kennel owners, and help our clients, pick out puppies, because we used to always schedule, like lots of times people now just pick over they'll tell us, well, we want this puppy. It used to be before we were able to do that, we scheduled 3 hours for every person that came to pick a puppy, because it literally took everybody 3 hours. They couldn't make up their mind which dog, and then we would have this process of going on and on, and some of those were interesting too when they were picking. We had a few young couples that, this is their first thing they're doing together as a married couple, and it was like their first fight, and finally, I remember a few times that the people said, I'm just standing there listening to their fights over which dog, and who's going to get to pick the dog, and they would say, well, can you leave us alone for a while? Because they were, but anyway, so that doesn't happen anymore, that kind of stuff, because people are, and sometimes people will come and visit from far away, but most of the time, the only people that visit are the people within driving distance. And, so the videos really, I think that's maybe besides trying to educate them and be, there for them when they have any questions or problems. And we really try to, to do well at that. And I think the telling point is just, we've been doing this 26 years now, and it's just how many repeat customers that we get. It's kind of mind boggling. So, we had actually one litter where every single person, it was only a litter of 6, but every person in that litter was a repeat customer. And, but generally, it used to be, about 15 years ago, we always had 1 or 2, and now it's pretty average to have 2, 3, or 4 repeat customers in every litter. So hopefully that means that, we're producing dogs that people like, and they like our service that we've given them, and we make really good connections with people. And I told my wife, I said, all these people invite us, well, come visit us anywhere, over here or here. And a lot of the people, I think they're very sincere. And my son's getting married next week out in Pennsylvania. And,
Oh, congratulations.
yeah, and somebody not too far from where they're getting married last year. I don't like people to sit in the airport. I feel bad for them. I hate airports. So I'll say, well, I'm going to come up and get, sometimes people are flying in, and sometimes we deliver the pups on the airplane. Other times people come and they take their pups back via carry-on. But sometimes people have long layovers. And I said, well, I'm going to come up and I'm going to pick you up early. I'm going to take you out to lunch, and then we're going to go, but we're going to get to go, and we're going to go. They have a nice park not too far from there. And we're going to have a picnic with the pup. And I'll spend 5 or 6 hours with them, just getting to know them face to face and making sure the pup gets tired out, for their flight back. Oh, this one lady, I was with her husband all that many hours, and she says, "Well, Paul, John mentioned that your son's getting married. When's he getting married?" And I said, "This day." She says, "Well, I love to cook, and I have a big house, and so if you wouldn't mind, I would like to cook for the groom's supper. And so I can host up to 50 people, and I would like to cook for up to 50 if you let me, And I said, wow. I said, Lorraine, I said, that's a really, really a generous offer, but I just wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. But when we get people that, we make these connections with people, and we get stuff like that all the time, And one man, he's part of a kind of a fancy chain of restaurants and stuff, and one of his jobs within the restaurant is he's the wine buyer, and they get a lot of their wine from France. And so just out of the blue one day, he calls me up and he says, "Paul, do you ever go to France to pick up your dogs in person?" And he goes, and I said, "No, generally if I import one, I just do it over the phone and I watch some videos and stuff." And he goes, "Well, if you ever want to, we have a condo over there in Paris, and or even if you didn't want to, if you just want to go over there and just take a vacation, I'll let you use it up for 2 weeks anytime you want, and you can just stay there. It's on me, but I just want you to know that if you want to go over there and see these dogs in person, that you have a place to stay." So I mean, we get offers like that all the time, and so I think it's from these personal connections we make, and that's actually one of the things I really like about.
Now you're going to get all the other breeders in trouble, and all of our spouses are going to expect that we start breeding French breeds, and we end up in Paris for vacations to go look at dogs, right?
Yeah. So I said, "Wouldn't that be fun, Carla?" We haven't done it yet, but I'm maybe someday.
Sure. And all these stories, they're a testament to the breed. So, and they're also a testament to you guys as breeders, and the support that you guys provide to your puppy buyers. And I want to circle back for a minute, and you kind of glossed over it, but I want to talk about your puppy delivery process that you put in place. Can you describe that?
Yeah. We probably could have been doing it for years. And, we used to always ship cargo. And so you'd bring the dog to the airport because, again, we ship all over the United States for a national kennel. And, well, it used to be you didn't have to be there that early. You just, maybe an hour before the flight took off, and if you got the dog booked, well, then airlines start changing things up a little bit. And a lot of airlines wanted your dog completed with their booking like 3 hours before. That was their comfort zone. And if you weren't, like Delta used to be, if you were in the middle of doing your paperwork, online, and the 2 hour mark hit, you would just not be able to fly. You couldn't ship the pup that day, even though you had scheduled it. And so they were making us start to wait longer and longer. And then during COVID, they wouldn't ship at all. So we were trying to look for other options, and so we came up with just all airlines allow you to carry on a pet. You won't be able to carry on a full grown dog, but you can carry on a puppy. And so we started figuring out I told my kids, I said, you guys can make all the money from this part. It's a separate gig from our kennel, but even though it's connected to our kennel, it can be kind of your little sideline business. And so they would figure out, what all their expenses were, and people would, sometimes their cost of us delivering it is more than the dog cost.
Yeah.
And by the time they pay for the flight and the kids' mileage, parking, and then they make $500 to deliver a puppy, and it's well-earned money. A lot of times they're 18 hours, between flights, getting to the airport and all day. And sometimes they have delays and stuff. But it's really gotten to be, we've only actually started doing this in the last year. And we've already had 12 people. That's quite a few in a small, dog breeding business that had taken that service. So it's, for the people that live far away, it's by far the most popular. I mean, a lot of people, and we get all kinds of people, all different wealths and stuff. But if you got enough money, nobody wants to spend all day sitting in an airport. You got better things. Maybe you had to take a day vacation, or you miss something else. And so a lot of them, they're really pleased to do this. And it took a while to come up with amount that we thought was fair. And I always tell people, these are your options. You can drive here yourself. And a lot of people do. They drive long ways, and from all coast and stuff, they'll drive all the way out here. You can fly here yourself. And if there's time, I'll take you to the park, and then we can deliver to you. And by far the most used is that we deliver to people, and it's gotten to be very, very popular, and sometimes people cut it a little bit close. Just 2 days ago, actually, a lady from Maryland was coming in, and she said, sent me her itinerary. And I don't know if you fly very much, but she had to get here, and then she had a 45 minutes from the time her plane landed to get on the other plane and board it, which is a pretty tight window.
Yeah, that's way too tight. Yeah.
And I said, can't you find a different flight back? And she said, no, this is the one I want to do. And I think it'll work. Well, then she asked, usually if I'm just doing a quick drop off, if they got a window, I just drive my truck up and they meet me outside, and I give them, but she said, well, could you go in the parking and just meet me at where I come in? And so I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I'm sitting there all of a sudden, and I look up there, and her flight's, there's a busy time, and her flight is 25 minutes delayed landing. So now she's got only 45 minutes to turn around. And so finally gets in there, and it was the quickest exchange I've ever done. They've gotten a dog from us before, about 6 years ago. So this is their second one. And she says, Paul, I'll be wearing a green print dress. I'll be coming through, and I don't have much time. And she texted me, and she comes through, and she comes up and hugs me right away. I feel like I've known you for years, Paul, but I got to go. And she says, is that my puppy? and she was going to, I already had it in a travel kennel, and she was going to take all the stuff out, so I didn't get to explain about the vet shots or anything. And I said, how about you just take that kennel and I'll take yours, the one that the puppy's already in. She says, oh, that'd be great. Bye, it's been great seeing you. And it was literally, if we reached the 40-second mark, that was as long as it was the exchange. So it's the very quickest exchange we've ever had. And yeah, no, the kids have done well. They it's a little extra money that they can get maybe to pay for a vacation or something. We don't have that many litters a year, so maybe 3 or 4. So, but if a third of the people want that service, then they can make a little extra money too, besides us and the dogs. But
yeah, that's smart. I actually had somebody reach out to me early today and ask what I recommend for shipping puppies. And I know you and I had spoken about what you do just a few days ago. And I said, hey, I think this is one of the best options that you could provide a puppy buyer right now. Best for the puppy, not that much more expensive for, for the puppy buyer. And he's got a college age kid and a kid who's probably a senior in high school, either one of which could travel, for a short trip with a puppy. So I think he's going to take your idea and do the same thing with his kids.
Yeah, it's a 1 day turnaround. I mean, Zach's my daughter just had a baby, so she's been kind of letting my son Zach do a lot of the trips, and he's gone to some really neat places. I mean, he was in San Francisco and he was in Seattle, he was in South Carolina and New York City, and I said, man, you should just take time to smell the roses. You're getting all these free trips, out to these places. You should just maybe spend a night in a hotel and go see the sights. But you know, they haven't done that so far. They kind of want to get home and because their spouses aren't with them anyway. So it's not something they kind of trip you want to do without your loved one with you. If you're going to do that. But yeah, so no, that's been just a real popular thing, and it was interesting. I'm going to give a shout out to your people that live in these states, Bill.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because we have placed dogs in 45 out of the 50 states.
Wow.
If there's anybody listening in Alaska, Utah, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and New Hampshire, give us a call. I said, that's a kind of a bucket list with me.
Okay.
I kind of want to get that all 50 states thing.
Well, I think the New Hampshire one should be pretty easy because there's some pretty darn good grouse hunting and, along the eastern border and, up north in New Hampshire. You should be able to send a cover dog or two that way, I would imagine.
But I think the issue there is Quebec's pretty close. And that's where the majority of the breeders in North America are. And so I think people up in that neck of the woods, I'm surprised I have a good number in Maine. I'm surprised that I've gotten so many pups from Maine, but with Quebec being, because it's just a short drive for them to get up there and get a pup if they want one.
Here's your selling point right here. And we've talked about this on the podcast maybe a couple times now. Starting August 1st, importing dogs is going to get to be really hard. Doesn't matter where they come from. They have to be a minimum of 6 months old in order to import them. Nobody wants a 6 month old dog. Yeah. So we want puppies. Now, 6 month old dog's still a puppy too, but
is that true?
Yes, sir. That's a new
CDC this is a headline requirement. For me.
Yeah. So, and for you, actually, that's a challenge for you as a breeder who you're probably still going to need to import a few dogs. It's a real thing. And it's all about vaccinations and vaccination records and the dog's health. That's why the CDC changed these requirements. It doesn't matter where the dog's coming from, minimum 6 months old. And there's a specific set of documentation for where the vaccinations come from and how they're administered. And I won't get into all that because I'm not an expert on it.
That's interesting, because the last two dogs I brought in from France, they had to be 4 months old.
Right.
And so they had all their vaccinations, and they were pretty big at 4 months, and they came in big carriers, and I mean, probably way bigger than they had to be, but I don't mind. I know I got a couple extra large crates, but that's interesting. I thought it was a junk mail thing. It was from a pet broker. He was announcing that, and I think he was trying to drum up business to kind of come through him. And I saw something like that, and I just hit junk, and so I didn't know it was legit. So that's.
Yep, it's legit. I'll send you a link to the CDC article after we're done with this, and you can read it for yourself because they explain it in a lot more detail, of course. But I mean, you've still got a month and a half before it comes into effect.
I've had actually quite a few people from some of the provinces that are closer to Minnesota just drive down. Sometimes I set up my cabin is 5.5 hours north of here. And so I'll say, well, I'll just bring a pup up to my cabin and you can meet me. Maybe you can do a little fishing or something if you want while you're there, and then take your pup home with you. And that way you don't have to drive so far. It'll save you 11 hours driving. And And
Geez,
so they're
Paul, if you're
all,
going to take me fishing, I'll buy a pup from you.
all right, come on over. Well, I got Indiana, but we can always add another one in Indiana.
Right, right.
But I'll give you our top 10 states
Okay,
that we placed in. Obviously, Minnesota is number one. And some of these may surprise you. Not Wisconsin, their neighboring state with grouse and pheasant hunting. But the number three state that we placed the next most French Spaniels in is California. And
okay. Now, is it because of the quail hunting in California?
it's both. They actually there's some people that have done really well on Air Force and Army bases out there because they're federal lands, so they can't
Sure.
hunt like within the. But there's just a lot of land that's owned by them, kind of a buffer zone around there, and that are just filled with quail, and they get their limits. But others are just pets. And
Hmm.
then another grouse hunting state, Michigan is fourth. Again, Iowa, again, proximity with pheasant hunting is just south of us. And then the state of Washington is as number six. Guy I just talked to yesterday, and that we delivered to the airport. He's from Washington, and he says he has 10,000 acres that he has permission to hunt on.
Oh,
That,
okay.
that his cousin owns it, and it's all wheat farming, but they have lots of. He said, "Well, you come out and hunt anytime you want with me," and so I might take him up on that. He made it
Yeah.
sound really good. Then Illinois is number seven, and the Illinois people would say it's Illinois, not Illinois, as I
I
always say it.
I say there's still an S in there, so
And then number eight is Oregon. And the interesting thing about Oregon, we've sent 16 puppies to Oregon,
oh wow.
and that over the years, but the majority of those 16 are in one town
Really?
in Bend, Oregon.
So you're getting some Oregon word of mouth customers for
Yeah,
sure
they're
then.
all people that have seen our dogs,
Yeah.
and or else they've hunted with the people that have them, and then they want one. And so that's as big a word of mouth place as we're ever going to get. And then number nine is Pennsylvania, and then the number 10 is South Carolina. And then and what I'm curious about on our list is that number 11 is Idaho, and kind of in that Boise area. They've sent a lot of dogs, but we sent 11 dogs to Idaho, but Utah is right below Idaho, and we've never sent a single dog to
Hmm.
Utah. So we were kind of surprised with that. We think, but then there's the big long list of everything else, and then we placed a few in other countries, quite a few in Canada, and now maybe not so much anymore with that new rule.
Well, yeah,
But
so I don't know what the export requirements are if they're changing at all, but I know the import requirements certainly are.
and then Mexico, Poland, Holland, England, and again a lot. So I mean, those were kind of a lot of our dogs that have gone, but I would that's just a big bucket list for me. I think it would just be fun to say we've placed one in every state, and
Yeah.
and Hawaii has a quarantine for dogs and stuff, but we got kind of around that because the lady who bought it was in the Navy. She was here on leave, and she was able to slip it into the Hawaii without having to go through all the regular
Okay.
quarantines, because Hawaii's a little more stricter on bringing a dog in there,
Yeah. Yep.
and stuff. But yeah, so that would be kind of fun.
Not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, we had Keith and Bridget Leindecker on from Great Lakes Gun Dogs. They breed the Brock Francais, and they delivered a puppy to Hawaii and got some hunting in while they were there. So if you get a chance, you have to listen to that episode because they talk about the upland hunting in Hawaii and the different game that are available there, and then how challenging it is with the terrain and the lava rock and things of that nature that you've got to contend with or that your shins have to contend with. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, there was one, like, I always tell people to ask, do they hunt this? And I said, well, I was telling people, I said, pretty much every bird we have in the continental United States, they've hunted. And I said, the only one is the sage hen. I haven't heard anybody shooting sage hens. And then there's the guy from California that was really doing really good on it. He moved to Wyoming, and and he was on some kind of little email group list that I was talking to, and he said, "Well, Paul, I'm going to get you your sage hens."
Yeah.
So it wasn't too long when the hunting season, he sent me a bunch of pictures with him with the sage hens that he had shot. So now you can say you got them all,
There you
you know,
go.
and so but that was the only one I hadn't really heard about, and so he was kind enough to cross the sage hen off our list. But
Excellent. Now, I also want to circle back. So you mentioned AKC recognition. Is the French Spaniel a fully recognized AKC breed, or are you guys still FSS or a rare breed, or where do you stand on
yeah,
that?
it's kind of that. I can't think of the term right off my head, but it's kind of more of an introductory, where you're not. I don't think they're fully recognized yet, but they can compete in all the AKC events and stuff. And again, I there was a gentleman in Canada that was always real mad at me, because he kept asking me to years and years ago to apply for AKC recognition, and I said, just from what I've seen and the reputation and stuff, and I said they got a bad reputation for pretty dogs. They really start focusing on show, and a lot of these breeds that got really popular through AKC that were these long-haired, beautiful dogs. I've had some of the hunt breed out of them, and a bred out of them. And I said, so I'm just gonna keep registering my dogs with Nod, but that's where my pedigrees come from when I send them out. And he was mad at me, and his term for me was a hunter, and I I thought that was kind of I said, thanks for the compliment, but he thought,
Right. I've been called worse.
yeah, I said, but he was mad, and but because I was afraid that would happen to the French Spaniel, but uh, finally they did get recognized, and so I'm glad it's going slow. I I just always fear, you've heard about the Irish setters and golden retrievers and some of those stories about them, that it's hard to find a dog in that breed that's a good hunter anymore. And I mean, some people have almost like the French Spaniel, they've kind of rescued some of the hunting lines and are kind of reintroducing some of those dogs to the United States. Kind of like in the history of the French Spaniel, there was a French priest that is said to be really the father of the French Spaniel. We kind of back in like the 1850s and stuff, there was a lot of different long-haired breeds in France, and they just grouped them all into one big group. Was their organization, and then there came a point where they just decided that they need all, there was all different colors, black and white, orange and white, tricolors, and big, small, just like Spaniels are now. And but it was that this priest thought, but he was against the split up into all these different categories, because he thought it was that monogenistic group of dogs that created all these that were being bred and shared breeding lines that created all these great these Spaniels. And then they started also importing dogs from some of these other countries to breed with these dogs. And once they split them up, well, then this priest, he kind of salvaged the best of the best that he could find. And then he spent the rest of his life dedicated to, saving the breed, and he had real strict guidelines. And then during the two world wars, it was real hard on the French Spaniel that, people weren't able to keep their dogs and stuff. And so that kind of put a hurt on, I think, a lot of dogs, And then after World War II, there's again there's always a group of people that seek out these dogs, and they kind of tried to rescue the dogs, and then they found the best of the best again, and started breeding back that was, back in 1960, they started, I think, really introducing them and getting it really established again. But, so we just don't want that to happen to the French Spaniel now again. We don't want, but I was going to mention, and Canada really does well. I mean, they might be the best in the world as far as all the requirements that they have for, within a Canadian club. They have a lot of physical and genetic tests that they require of their breeders if they're going to be able to advertise in their breed clubs and stuff. And then they also want their dogs to pass a confirmation test. So basically, a show. You don't have to be big into show, but they have to pass. They have to pass one, and they have to pass a hunt test. And so, and that's the best, I think, the way to go. If if you're going to show, you have to pass a hunt test. So because then you're still having a beautiful dog that looks like it's supposed to look, but it also hunts. And within the Canadian breed clubs, there was people that didn't want to do both of them. They just wanted to do shows. So in Canada now, there's two separate breed clubs. One is the one that does both hunt and conformation, and another that's more looking along the lines of show dogs and things like that.
And that's the worst thing that can happen for the breed. And that's why registry is what can help to save your breed. So getting your dog AKC recognized, your breed AKC recognized, it's what's going to prolong the hunting lines in your breed, because now that American breed club, if there is one, but it's with our breed, we have the Small Munsterlander Club of America. We manage the breed standard. So we are the ones that influence the conformation, structural, temperament requirements for the AKC. If we hadn't done that, and I say I haven't been involved that long. If they hadn't done that before who knows, somebody else would have done it, and maybe non-hunters would have done it, and maybe they'd be looking for dogs with a super soft coat, with extremely long furnishings or things of that nature that we know. Like, my dog is very well furnished. I really like that, but it's not a lot of hunters' favorite thing, because the other thing that likes long furnishings are cockleburs, right? And that takes time to clean out. So there are a lot of people that prefer shorter furnishings on the dogs. If you look at the breed standard says that they're well furnished. That's subjective. I don't know what that means, but we know it's important that they're there. But somebody who's a show dog only person might want those extremely long furnishings. They
Right.
might like a dog that's too long-legged, maybe not deep enough in the chest, maybe a longer tail, all these other things that as hunters we might not prefer. And it wouldn't be the best for the dog, for the breed as a hunting breed. So I'm a big fan of the AKC registration now that somebody schooled me up on that.
Yeah, that was me too. As far as, and I didn't realize, I hadn't been real familiar with the AKC hunt tests and stuff, and how they bring that along, and so I was pretty impressed with that way, and they said, you don't have to go that other route. They have two avenues, lanes you can go down, and I was more comfortable with it once I learned more about that, because it's a little bit different than NOD, because you have winners and losers in these hunt tests, but they still have to hit a standard, and which is good. Like I said, there's really only one, that lady in Texas that's done really well, and she's the only one I really know that have really, other people that have hunt tested the dogs and things, they've all done NAVDA,
Well, and you have winners and losers in the trials, but in the AKC hunt tests, junior hunter, senior, and master hunter, those are judged against the standard.
That's a standard then.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
But it's a totally different standard in that there's no water involved for our pointing breeds, but at the senior hunter level, they're required to back. And in NAVDA, you don't have to back or honor until you go to the invitational. And how many NAVDA dogs go to the invitational? I mean, it's a very small fraction. A small fraction qualifies, and even of that, even fewer go. So a lot of NAVDA dogs would never be tested on their ability to back, whereas AKC tested dogs, you have to do it at the intermediate level.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like I said, I really haven't delved into the AKC stuff. I'm just my strength of knowing what's going on is in the knob. Speaking of backing, that's one thing all our dogs have always done naturally. And uh, one day I was out with a friend, and he had a wire here and or a Drahthaar, because his was more the German line, and then all of a sudden one of my dogs locked up on point, and it and I and I mean they do it so naturally, like anything and I said, "Oh, is there a bird there, Paul?" I said, "No." So what do you mean? And she's honoring that stump. It kind of it's kind of, I know she's honoring that stump. I said she took a glance, and all of a sudden she froze. And it's kind of shaped like a dog. And I said, I know that's what it is. And so they'll honor anything, I guess.
That's awesome. All right. Paul, we've been on for a while now. I'm gonna cut this one. As much as I'd love to sit here and talk to you, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but I do think we have to wrap it up at some point. So what else would you like to add, or I'll give you an opportunity to wrap it up and close it out.
I just think that, number one, even though our dogs are good hunting dogs, I think, and for me, the temperament has always been the most important thing. I think the hunting abilities will come there and be there, whether they come fast or slow. But I think they're like I mentioned before. I think they're just a very nice. I almost think they're elegant. Like some of these setters are beautifully. And here's one of my girls right here. I don't know if you can see her.
I could see her walking around in the background before.
Oh, she's on my fire now, but and they're just such a sweet personality, and they just make you want to be with them. And it's so, and when you hunt, it's just, I had a guy with the Brady. He kept walking with me, and he thought, "This is just so relaxing. This is you got three dogs out here, and they're just all working well and going back and forth within a nice distance, and you haven't said a word to them." And I just said, well, that's part of it. They hunt at a comfortable pace, comfortable distance, and we're just a beautiful dog. So now, and there's lots of other nice dogs out there, but I think we just happen to have one of them.
That's awesome. And you guys are Minnesota French Spaniels,
Yep.
right? How can people contact you if they want to learn more about a French Spaniel, or maybe go ahead and get on the wait list for one?
Well, pretty much all you have to do is go to our website, Minnesota French Spaniels, or we have Facebook to it. We have lots of information. We do a lot of posts on our Facebook page, and then all our information, all our contact information is on there. So we tried to give it a name right away where people would know where we're at. So if they just look up Minnesota French Spaniels or French Spaniels in the United States, we come up right away too. So.
Excellent. Well, Paul, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being on the show.
You bet. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed episode number 20 of the Whoa Post podcast. If you did, leave a 5-star review on your podcast directory of choice. Remember to share the podcast with all of your friends, like and follow on social media, and become a patron at patreon.com/thewhopost. And if you own a bird dog related business and you'd like to advertise on the Whoa Post podcast, you can contact me at bill@thewhopost.com. Stay steady and God bless.